Hi, welcome to our Chapter 7 lecture. I thought I'd do a video today just to mix things up. I think it's nice to have that personal connection and see the face of the person speaking to you. Chapter 7 is all about researching your speech. This is the content for week 3. I said by the middle to end of week 2, you wanted to have a suitable topic for your speech. So now the step is to go and research that topic. So this chapter has 3 main points. What is research? Developing a research strategy and citing sources. We're going to spend the most time talking about citing sources, and that's going to be very beneficial not only for your outline that you have due at the end of this week, but the assignment, the APA worksheet assignment that is due at the beginning of this week. So let's go ahead and talk about what is research first and foremost. Again, this is the definition coming straight from your textbook. Scholarly investigation into a topic in order to discover, revise, or report facts, theories, and applications. And then we have 2 types of research. We have primary research and secondary research. Primary research is reported by the person conducting the research. So this is your first hand. So if you were to do a survey or an interview and then you were to utilize that information within your speech, that's primary research. Secondary research is what we do most, and that's reported by someone who's not involved in conducting the actual research. So if you read a journal article or something online and incorporate that into your speech, you're using secondary research. Primary research, secondary research, it's not to say that one is better than the other, just that there are 2 different types. Let's talk about developing a research strategy. So when we talk about developing a research strategy, the very first thing that we really want to talk about is time management. Time management is always a struggle, particularly when you are working on such a short time frame. So you want to determine the project life cycle, and you want to ask yourself, how much time do I have? So looking at your syllabus, you can see when your assignments are given to you and when you have your assignments due. The textbook recommends that your research time takes about 1/3 of your total time. So for your purposes, that's about 5 days. And that's why I said by middle to end of week 2, you have that topic. You've written your specific purpose to help narrow and focus, and then you're ready to go and research. So from the Sunday as the start of the week until when you have your outline due, you have a full week, but I figure a couple days that you have to write the outline in which you're going to kind of stop researching at that point. Once you've written the outline, you want to be thinking about the other items that go into speech preparation. And that includes finding and or creating a visual aid. All of your speeches require the use of a visual aid, and we'll talk more in depth about that in an upcoming chapter. And then also practicing out loud. Taking a look at your syllabus, your outline is due at the end of week 3. And then your speech video is due in the middle of week 4. And based on the textbook recommendation of 1 day per minute, you need to make sure that you are utilizing your time wisely. So you want to make sure that you have time management and that you look at the entire project life cycle and then break it down into those little parts. Next, you need to determine your needs. What type of sources or supporting materials do you need? Well, specifically, you need scholarly or academic sources. And we're going to talk about the difference between scholarly and popular or just general sources. You also want to be focused and strategic when you sit down to research. You don't want to be haphazard and random, because that's how you find yourself watching YouTube videos of Keyboard Cat at 3 a.m. Lastly, finding resources. Now, your text gives you a lot of information about finding resources. So at least 4 pages talking about non-academic sources, but we're going to skip that because what you need to be concerned with are the academic sources. When we talk about finding resources, and they're specifically academic, we're talking about items that are peer-reviewed. These are things that are not written for the average everyday person. They are written for a specific audience, and that's an academic audience. So whether it's a scholarly book, article, computerized databases, or scholarly web, you want to make sure that you are getting the right type of information. And your textbook is really beneficial because it gives you information about the databases that you can use. I've also included some information on your Blackboard page about using our digital library to help you research and what we have access to at Stark State. And then also for scholarly web information, they give you a table of really good URLs to use. You want to try out some of those, particularly if you've never tried them out before, and steer clear of your general generic Google, Wikipedia, or things like that for researching your speech. Additionally, make sure to pay attention to the list of the 6 tips provided in your textbook. Creating a research log, looking at background info, learning to use library computers, skimming rather than actually reading thoroughly and completely each item, reading reference pages and what you can glean for those, and then asking for help if and when necessary. The last item is evaluating sources, and this is something that students and beginning speakers don't often know that they need to do. Evaluating all of your sources are important, but online sources particularly. So what are you looking for when you're evaluating a source? Asking yourself, is it credible or not? Should I be using it? Number 1, what is the date of publication? Ideally, you want sources that are at least within the last 5 years. Now, that's not going to be the case in every situation. You might have a historical topic in which you need an older document, and that's okay, but that should be the exception to the rule. Number 2, who is the author? Who is the person that's responsible for that information? Is this person qualified to be writing about what they're writing about? Are they just an average everyday person putting information out there, or are they an expert in the field, an expert either through education or experience? Who is the publisher? Is the publisher biased in any way, shape, or form? That's something that you might want to be a little bit cautious about. Is it an academic or a non-academic source? Remember, for your speech, your 3 sources need to be academic in nature, and those are a little bit more difficult and time-consuming to find as well as using, because they are written in a much more difficult way than your average everyday information. Do the sources have quality references? If the source that you're using is using shoddy research practices itself, that should raise a red flag. That's problematic. That's something that you want to steer clear of. And then lastly, a good thing to take a look at is, do other people cite the work? Do the colleagues, do the peers in the field see it as something that is accurate, true, quality, worthwhile? Or is it that item out there that nobody really pays attention to, people don't agree with, it goes against the grain too much? So it's important that you're asking yourself these questions about the sources and whether or not you should really be using them, and can you trust the information that is in them? Is that information that you should include in a speech and be passing on to others? After you have developed that research strategy and you've put it into action, you're going to need to cite your sources. So let's talk about in-text citations in your outline. You're going to have in-text citations on your outline, and then you're also going to have what's called oral citations in your speech. And then you'll have your reference page that goes along with your outline. So let's talk about these different documents. In-text citations in an outline. When quoting or paraphrasing a reference source, that source must be cited. And there's specific information that you're going to need to include. Author, date, and if it's a direct quotation, the page number goes in parentheses after the quote or the paraphrase. So take a look at the example here. Participants in the study revealed that 88% of their anxieties resulted from inhospitable treatment by doctors and nurses. So no end punctuation, we have the end of the quotation mark, and then in the parentheses, author's last name, Davidson, followed by a comma, the year, followed by a comma, and then P period 44, end parenthesis, and then the final punctuation, the period. So there's a couple different items on Blackboard that show you how to do in-text citations. So just make sure that you do take a look at all of those resources to get an idea if this is something that you've never done or you're not quite sure about. If the author's name, the date, or both are mentioned in the sentence, the information does not need to be repeated in the citation. So the in-text citations in the body of a research paper go along with the reference page. So let's talk specifically about that reference page. So you're going to be using APA style, and that stands for American Psychological Association. And there's different formats depending on what type of source you have. So if it's a book, an online source, or a newspaper, there's a slightly different format for each. So you want to start by asking yourself, what kind of source is this? And then going and looking for the format that you need to follow. And on this slide, you can see each of those are 3 different citations. The first one is in fact a book. The second one is an online source. And then the third one is a newspaper. And you'll see slightly different information in different areas. As a couple of guidelines, let's go over these bullet points. If you cite a source in the text, include it in the reference list. List the references in alphabetical order by the author's last names. If there's no author, there's specific instructions on what goes first. Sometimes it might be the article title. If you looked up something for the encyclopedia, it's the word that you looked up, so on and so forth. And the author could be an organization. So whatever that first item is what you use to alphabetize your list. The reference list should be double-spaced. You should indent 5 spaces after the first line of entry. This is called a hanging indent. So if you have a reference that takes up multiple lines, the second line is going to be indented from the first. If it has 3 lines, then that line is also going to be indented 5 spaces or 1 tab. For sources with no date given, use the abbreviation N period D period in place of the date. So these are all tips that I don't expect you to memorize or know by heart. I don't know these by heart, but these are some of the most common guidelines that you'll want to be aware of. And again, all of these items are in the references that I've put on your Blackboard page. I've given you quite a few of different APA reference items, and some of them have appeared in previous weeks or in other folders just so that they're in multiple spots so that you can find and use them easily. Now let's talk about oral citations in a speech. So when you write the preparation outline, you're going to have in-text citations. Those are going to be in-text or parenthetical, and then you have that reference page. When you give the speech, you need to provide an oral citation, and that has a slightly different format than a written citation. So you want to first set up the citation. You want to give a couple sentences to integrate the research into what you're saying. For example, workplace bullying is becoming an increasing problem for U.S. organizations. This is going to be information that you yourself have come up with, your own wording, your own idea, your own content, and then you're going to include the reference material. They're going to be a direct quotation or paraphrase information. Either one is fine. I suggest using a little bit of each. If it is if a direct quotation, if it's something that's short, sweet, to the point, and you can't say it any better. If it is difficult to understand, long, lengthy, really wordy, or technical, paraphrase it, because that's going to be easier for the listener to hear and understand. When you give the citation information, you have to provide a complete citation. And a complete citation includes the following 4 items. And this is really important. If you look at the grading rubrics for the speech, there's a lot of points for this category. Number 1, you need to provide the author. And again, that can be an individual, that can be a couple of people, that might be an organization that is the author. If there is no author or it's anonymous, you want to say something like that. Just as if you used ND to indicate no date on the reference page, you want to indicate that in the oral citation. There's a big difference between indicating that it was an anonymous source or there was no author versus just leaving that out. If you just leave it out and don't say anything, it's going to seem like it's an incomplete citation or that you ignored part of what you needed to give. If you say it's anonymous or that there was no author, you are acknowledging it and you are indeed providing that piece of the criteria. Number 2, the author's credentials or qualifications. Who is the person that wrote this and why are they qualified to write it? You don't have to give a lengthy explanation, but a couple of sentences to let the listener know. Okay, so I'm back. Slightly different location on a different day, but I thought let's go ahead and finish out this PowerPoint. So as I was saying, with the oral citations in the speech, there's 4 pieces of information that you need to provide. The first one is to provide the author. The second one are the author's credentials or qualifications. The third is the date of publication. The fourth is the media or the source. So for example, the title of the book, the title of the journal, the website where you found the information. You want to let the listener know where you got that because they're going to be judging, evaluating, and assessing the worth or the credibility of that information. Here are some examples. This just has placeholder text, but this shows you with that same fake source 4 different ways that you could write an oral citation, and each of these are correct because I've color-coded it just to help you see. Each of them have the 4 pieces of information, but they're not all written exactly the same to give it some variety and some interest. So I'll just read the first 2. In Clever Book Title, published 2010, James Smith, a self-made millionaire, says, blah, 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 can help you save time and money. And another example, the second one, a self-made millionaire, James Smith, states, blah, 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 can help you save time and money in his 2010 bestseller, Clever Book Title. So you can see 4 different examples, making sure that you are giving complete citation with all 4 of those items. So with the oral citations, number 1, you set up the citation. You say a couple of sentences, getting ready to introduce the supporting material. Then, when you give that information that came from that outside source, you make sure that you provide those 4 items for your oral citation. The third part is to explain the citation. You want to make sure that you take the time to explain the information and not just let their audience
not just let the audience draw their own conclusions about the information that you've used. You want to help them make the connections. Why did you choose to use the information? What do you think that it shows? What do you think that it explains? And then lastly, during the speech, if you use a source multiple times, give the complete oral citation the first time, so all 4 items. But on subsequent references of that same source, give an abbreviated oral citation. So there's no need to repeat the same 4 items if you're using that same source multiple times throughout your speech. And you'll most likely have multiple pieces of information from each of your 3 sources used throughout the speech in a different area. So providing all 4 of those items every single time you used that same piece, that same source rather, would just be unnecessary and overly redundant. So for example, if I had 4 different quotations from the clever book title, I would not want to give all 4 pieces each time. I might just give a quick reminder so the audience knows that it's the source I mentioned previously. And this is a little bit of an art form. This is something that takes practice, and it's something that you'll get used to. So don't worry about trying to do everything perfectly the first time through. You'll be getting feedback based on how you did and tips and tricks to help you improve for your second and your third speech. So that is Chapter 7, Researching Your Speech.